Hey, this is Mike with Family Handyman. Today we're going to be working on a woodworking technique to create custom inlays to build this growth chart, but you can use it to create your own inlays for your project. Let's get started. So what I've done to begin is create a line down the center of this slab and then place my numbers at each mark. Then I'm going to clamp this straight edge right along that center line, and what that'll do is it'll give me a stopping point for my router and a guide for my router that's perpendicular to this to create my hash marks for the inches and the feet marks. I set the ruler of a combination square and used it as a guide to scribe down the edge of the slab. This line will give me a stopping point from the edge of the slab for the many hash marks I'll be making. Then I hooked my tape measure on the bottom of the slab to make marks at every single inch along the straight edge. So now that I have all the inch marks from the top to the bottom of the slab and my scribe line about 2 inches away from the edge, I'm going to start making these inch hashes up to this scribe line. I'll do that by lining up my speed square against the straight edge with the marks, and then coming through with my router with the V-groove bit and stopping at the scribe line. So we're done with the hash marks on the slab. Now we're moving on to the inlays. I've printed off my patterns and I will be using spray adhesive to adhere them onto the wood to then cut them out on the scroll saw. For the inlays, I'm using a piece of 1/4 inch maple, which will look really nice contrasted against the cherry slab. The scroll saw is my preferred tool for cutting out these inlays. The small blade makes it easy to turn tight corners and follow curves. If you don't have a scroll saw, you can use a small blade on a jigsaw, but you'll have much more cleanup work to do. With the shapes cut out, I smoothed out the edges with a piece of sandpaper on my workbench. I positioned the inlays with some double-sided tape and then traced the outline with a marking knife. You could also use a pencil. Once I had my inlays traced, I drilled a small hole within the pattern as a starting point for my router bit. To make routing out the inlays into the slab a little bit easier, I'm using a jig. I started with a 10 by 6 inch piece of 1/4 inch acrylic and placed the router's original base plate in the center to transfer screw locations onto the acrylic. I drilled the mounting holes with a countersink bit and a setter hole with a 1 inch Forstner bit. There it is. Then I used the router's mounting screws to fasten the new base plate to the router. I drilled 2 more holes on the sides to add some handles. So I've got the holes drilled in my numbers. Now I'm ready to take out the majority of the material inside the numbers. Now to do that, I'm using a 1/4 inch down spiral bit set up in my router to just under the depth of the numbers. I don't want to press them into the recess too far, but I don't want to have to sand a ton either. Once I got the majority of the material out, I'm going to switch to an even smaller bit to get even closer to the lines. The router jig that I made makes this fine detail and freehand work quite easy, as long as you take your time. Any straight bit will work for this, but a downward spiral bit pushes the wood fibers down, making a clean edge, free of splinters and chip out. Once the bulk of the material was removed, I moved to a smaller 1/8 inch spiral bit. What I need to do now is use a fine chisel to clean up the corners where the router couldn't fit, and then likely I'll have to refine the shape of the numbers so that they can fit nicely. So before we set these permanently in place with glue, I want to make sure they fit nice. So to test the fit, I've wrapped around some blue tape, made a little tab. That way I can press it most of the way in and pull it out with no problem. Once I was confident each of the inlays fit, I spread glue to the corners and up the sides of the recess, then carefully pressed the inlay in until it was just about flush with the surface of the slab. Then I wiped away any excess glue, scraped off the paper, and sanded the inlays flush. Now that we're done sanding, it's just about ready for finish, but before we do that, I want to fill in some of these small gaps around some of the numbers here. I'm gonna do that using a homemade wood filler I like to use using shellac and the wood dust that I collected while sanding the slab. Many like to mix sawdust and wood glue for their homemade filler to match the wood that's being used, but the wood glue won't accept stain or finish, which will make it stand out among the beautiful wood grain. Instead of wood glue, I like to use shellac because it's stainable and will blend in with the rest of the wood after finish is applied. And it's also really easy to sand during your final sanding. Then I applied several coats of shellac for a finish. This works really well over the homemade filler I used, and it dries quickly, so I can do lots of coats in one day. So the finish is on. I'm gonna let it dry and do a few more coats, then it's ready to hang up on the wall. So for more great woodworking projects like this, head to familyhandyman.com.